All right, this is Bob Carson of Mob Chats and Carson's Corner, and I have two gentlemen on the Zoom call with me right now that I am so excited to have on because they're doing something special. They're doing absolutely something special. This is the addendum, the re-release of the book Rough and Tumble, which came out, I believe, in 2010, The History of American Submission Wrestling. And this is a must, in my opinion, for anybody that is interested in jiu-jitsu, grappling, catch wrestling, fill in the blank, the history, everything, the stories in this book, the endorsements. Art Davie was just one of the latest individuals, key figures to give this book an endorsement. And we're honored to have Erik Paulson, who needs absolutely no introduction. And of course, also a man that also needs no introduction, the King of Connecticut, Matthew Grannahan. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with me here on this Friday evening. How are you guys?
Really good. Thanks. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. It's a pleasure, man. I want to say to all your viewers, happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays. Yeah,
right.
I got these Christmas songs still stuck in my head. You know, I guess that's normal nowadays, these days.
I play them on the road, up and down the road. One thing I want to say real quick, my name is not Mike. It says Mike on here. And the reason is I'm at the house of a promoter, a renowned promoter of music. And he's done some with the combat sports world. Michael Caramico. I had the pleasure of hosting a grappling festival under his Millionaire Fight Club years ago. It was not even that many years ago. It was Christmas time, right, Mike? We were down in Miami, Florida, and it was headlined by Andrea KGB Lee against the rising champion at the time, I believe, Andrea or Andy Wynn. They had Christy Garr, who wrestled for Michigan State, I believe, on the card. A lot of great women grapplers at this festival. King Mo came in one day and hosted with me. It was a great event. And Mike Caramico now is working with Roger Daltrey and The Who, and he's got a new Italian musician that he hasn't even released the name. This guy, actually, he's going to release the name finally. He goes under three initials, NIC, and he's opening up for Roger Daltrey here. These guys have stadium shows, all signed out. Mike's got a beautiful place here. He's got this podcast room here, and he just grilled us up some steaks with him and his family. Always a pleasure around the holidays to be here with family and friends and enjoy some libations and some great food. And I want to also thank Erik Paulson for the great hospitality when I was out in California. Fullerton, Erik took me to some great places, great German restaurants, and great Latino food out there. Latino, hablo español. When we were out there as well. And we spent a couple of hours in the ring doing this retrospective on the book. And it was so much fun. It's great to see Erik. CSW is such a great gym. And Bob, it's great to be here with you as well.
Absolutely. I mentioned this came out, you started back in 2009 and then it ended up coming out in 2010. This is to both of you, Erik or Matt. Why the addendum?
Because a lot of the people that we wrote about have passed on. So we wanted to give homage to a lot of the great wrestlers and grapplers that contributed to the art and the sport, and they passed since then, and we wanted just to pay respects to them and then kind of give an update also on what's going on and who's who and what's what and what's big now. And so we started mentioning a bunch of different people also, and just a heads up who to look out for.
And to add to that too, Erik's absolutely right. And beyond that, there's a whole generation of grapplers, of fighters, of amateur wrestlers, of professional wrestlers that don't know their history, that didn't read our book. And especially how the world has changed now and people forget the shoot history in professional wrestling. Amateur wrestlers don't know the submissions from their history. They don't know when they go into MMA that wrestling had submissions. They think they have to just exclusively know Jiu-Jitsu. They don't know the history of Jiu-Jitsu. They don't know about Mitsuya Maeda, Count Koma, all his extensive background in catch wrestling. They don't know judo and the dominance wrestlers had in judo. When I started in judo, we could attack the legs from a standing position. We could do what we call like short blast doubles. You can't do that now. Erik recounted years ago, you couldn't attack the leg locks in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now everything is all encompassing, but it's wonderful for grapplers. I mean, these great guys like Gary Tonin and all these great grapplers, but the young grapplers, so many of them, they don't know their history. And you got to know your history. So many other sports do a great job with history. In grappling, it's lost and forgotten, but no longer, because of our book and the work of great guys like Jake Shannon as well, Mark Hewitt, Mike Chapman, in preserving this rich history.
Jake Shannon is such a historian. He knows everything about everything, and he got firsthand knowledge because he got to spend tons of time with Billy Robinson and get him out, and Wade Shales and all these different wrestlers, and he got all the stories and all the insights. So he's a great historian. I've hooked him up with tons of people for podcasts because of his history of catch wrestling.
Yeah, Jake is a great guy, and I got to add to this too, Bob. A man who was like a father to me, like a second father to me, Billy Wicks, and also Frankie Kane, such a great guy. Guys that I learned so much from on and off the mat that came out of the carnivals. This rich history, once again, we need to preserve it. We need to honor the past.
That's what I like about this book here, is that it's not a purist book. It's it's all positive about giving homage, paying respect to the history of catch wrestling, the different areas of grappling, whatever you want to call it. It's not a purist book. It's all positive. It's about giving people due that deserve their due.
Well, I think another thing I would like to say is catch wrestling has blossomed so much. You've got Snake Pit, and you got Alliance, and you got all these catch wrestling magazine, you got Catch Wrestling UK, and all these different organizations that are now promoting catch wrestling. And as I said, Eddie Bravo did a great thing with the EBI, because what he did is he merged their intricate style of jiu-jitsu with all the leg attacks. Yeah. So now if you watch a lot of the EBI guys or tournaments, that looks like Shudo. And Shudo back then didn't have so much jiu-jitsu. It was judo, catch wrestling, sambo, and wrestling. They were a Japanese jiu-jitsu, but they were lacking. What they lacked was the Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Now, the way Eddie promoted it and included the legs and stuff, I love it, because now those guys, if you were to ask me, they emulate all the old catch wrestlers from combat wrestling from Japan, and also from Shudo and Pancrase and UWF and all those guys. They have that style. Yep, Pancrase. They have that style, and the style is these guys are doing. They're making, especially now. That Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu exists in Japan. I actually was training and fighting in Japan when Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu did not exist in Japan. Mm-hmm. And I actually got accused of teaching the Japanese Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I had to laugh and say, hey, this is my secret weapon. When I go fight in Japan, I'm not going to show people what I'm going to use, because they already have the catch wrestling. They already have the judo and the wrestling. They have the leg attacks, but they don't have the jiu-jitsu, which were the transitions and the escapes and the attack style that jiu-jitsu had to offer at that time. So it was just kind of strange. But now a lot of the guys, as I said, that compete in any grappling tournaments, everyone's learning to wrestle. They're all incorporating wrestling. Andre Galvao, all these guys, Craig Jones, Gordon Ryan obviously is doing all of it, and Donaher's doing a great job with all those guys, and a lot of other coaches too. They all are teaching these guys. They're teaching all of them wrestling. They all know that wrestling is a dominant sport. Plus, they already have jiu-jitsu. They're already rolling. So they're really combining the two together. So they're merging into a hybrid system. So all these guys that were just straight jiu-jitsu guys are all learning how to wrestle now.
You know, it's
Yeah, and
it's
Erik mentioned Gordon Ryan, and I wanted to mention another gentleman. I had the pleasure of being on Inside BJJ with Gordon Ryan when Curran Jacobs was trying to get his match with Gordon Ryan. And we should mention Curran Jacobs, fine young man, won a grueling catch wrestling tournament. He co-hosted my podcast, my old podcast, King's Court, with me a few times. Great young man, so many great organizations in grappling and catch wrestling. And the theme that we want to make sure that we express here, Bob, Erik and I are all about being positive, and we have a great saying, what other people think of you is none of your business.
Yeah.
And sadly, in the grappling community, and particularly in the catch wrestling community, there's been a lot of this infighting with these different organizations, and do your own thing, man. Yeah.
The squabbling name calling it degrades things, and it makes things go to a lower level. Everything should be for the big picture, that everyone's growing and learning and shaking hands with each other. And that needs to be extremely important. And, people talk smack on each other. That's just, a lot of that's just for show, but as far as you should be learning from everybody. I mean, it's all about learning. Everything's about learning. You have your competition. You either win or you learn. There's no losing. You learn.
Yeah.
So you should be always learning and growing and expanding your knowledge and refining your skills on what you have.
And you guys know me. I mean, there's nothing wrong with trash talking if you're promoting something, if you're promoting a match or whatever. But what went on with these different organizations, they weren't promoting anything, and they were turning a lot of people off. And I think it's time to rise above all of that.
Yeah, that's one of the things I really like about this book and what you're doing. And, you talked about a lot of pro wrestlers, a lot of shooters, a lot of hookers, a lot of, guys that originated down, in the Barker era and whatnot. What are some of the more notable stories or examples that are in this book that people can really learn about the history of catch wrestling and how bad these guys were, bad in a way where you don't want to mess with these guys. They know what they're doing.
Let me tell you some stories. If you go back in the book and you look at a guy named Elio Gracie, who everybody knows Elio, right? When he fought Valdek Zabisco, when he fought Fred Ebert, when he fought Masahiko Kimura, who the double wrist lock, was named after. They named the Kimura after, who is also a catch wrestler and pro wrestler and judoka. And the beatings that Elio took. Elio was a tough man. He was a great man, but he took some real beatings from these guys, particularly from Waldek Zabisco. And then the great thing that this book has is the firsthand knowledge. I was so fortunate to be able to be trained by Billy Wicks, who came in right out of the carnies into pro wrestling, from collegiate wrestling to the carnies to pro wrestling, and Frankie Kane, that were beating all comers. And what this book has is the firsthand stories directly from the guys themselves. As Erik mentioned, many of them have passed now. Dick Cardinal, Red Bastien. So you're going to have to read the book, and you're going to get some great stories about the toughness of these guys, and names that you likely have never heard of in the pages of Rough and Tumble.
Yeah, and again, these are people often minimize or dismiss quote unquote pro wrestling. I have somebody in the media that calls it the fake pro wrestling. Now these guys and many of the guys that you talk about in the book, I don't know if you mentioned too. There's another gentleman who I had an opportunity to sort of train under. His name is Jody Malenko, the brother, of course, Dean Malenko.
Joe Malenko.
I could tell you,
Malenko brothers were amazing. They were God's proteges.
Oh yeah, exactly. And listen,
Florida, they were in Florida with them.
Yes, yeah. Take my word for it. Those guys are legit shooters, legit tough guys, legit. You did not want to mess with them on the ground. And and that's what I like about this book is that you guys really attribute certain things. There's not a monopoly on anything. You talk about how Jiu-Jitsu came about in this book. Matthew, you also talk about Billy Wicks, and one of the things I find interesting about Billy Wicks is he talked about having a job, always having a job when you're engaging in martial arts, when you're engaging in MMA or catch wrestling or whatnot. I thought that was kind of notable and very, very applicable and realistic in today's lifestyle, where we see a lot of MMA fighters who have jobs or full-time firefighters or so on and so forth.
And so with Billy Wicks, who those of us that were close to him all call Pops. With Pops, he went from the collegiate mats, McAllister, to the Carneys taking on all comers with Henry Colin, into the Memphis territory with Sputnik. But he didn't have an extended career. He had a good run doing the pro wrestling, but he went to in the Memphis Police Department, and he was training. He started out training, and Erik will know what this is. I'm sure you will too, Bob, as a martial artist. What they call now DT, or defensive tactics, which is the hand-to-hand for police officers in Memphis. And he rose to become the main sheriff in Memphis, Tennessee. And as a result of that, had a great retirement package and pension and all, which a lot of pro wrestlers don't have, like NFL players. UFC fighters and pro wrestlers don't have those kind of pensions. But he had that pension, but he also worked at Waynesville Recreation Center, and that's where Johnny Husky, the late Johnny Husky, who's passed away now, met him and sought him out so that he could teach at a place called Arden Barbell Club. And that's where I first met him. I used to go to Asheville, North Carolina every month for work when I was with the breweries, and I was grappling at the time, and I went there to train at night. It was just a $5 mat fee. And I didn't know this history. And I learned it directly through meeting Billy Wicks there. I mentioned in our addendum, he liked the way I was riding this guy. And it was all stuff that I learned from old coaches, which Billy was really big on: using your head, using your fist, driving your elbow in. And he liked the way I was punishing this young man. And he gave me some pointers on how to do it better. And then from there, literally from going to those classes, we became so close friends. I was always at his house. Every time I was in Asheville, watching fights, drinking beer, I introduced him to Kamal Shalarus, who he loved. He was really close with Kamal. He loved Kamal because Kamal came from Iran. And Kamal, we didn't mention in the addendum what we should have, because he did a quote on the back of the book. If anybody wants to see how good Kamal was, watch when he fights Khabib in UFC. That is Khabib's toughest fight.
Yeah, Khabib versus Kamal. That's a fight. That's a great one.
The amazing fight.
A lot of people don't know that a lot of the presidents were wrestlers and catch wrestlers. And that's another thing that we mentioned in there, because came up in our history. They either boxed or they wrestled. That's America's martial art. It's wrestling or boxing.
Teddy Roosevelt was so big into wrestling. He had Frank Gotch at the White House, that famous story. And he also was a boxer. Teddy boxed until he hurt his eye so bad, and then he focused more on the wrestling, but he was always a wrestler and a boxer. But he's not the only one. Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, you'll read about her in the book. Howard Taft, all the presidents that were wrestlers.
That's amazing. Erik, you talked about the dark ages of catch wrestling. In a lot of ways, I think these figures in the book are tougher than we see now, athletes now, because there wasn't a lot of awareness. There wasn't a lot of awareness of how to treat diseases. There wasn't a lot of awareness of medical procedures. So these guys oftentimes would be really, really severely impacted by, impetigo, ringworm, suicide, so on and so forth.
It's because times were tough, and if you broke your tooth, you'd get a brain infection, because the rotten tooth would affect your brain. People will go crazy. they would impetigo in their face. They would get boils or open wounds. If you got like ringworm or pink eye, for instance, if you got conjunctivitis, pink eye, sometimes they didn't have a cure for it. So you'd lose your eye, you go blind. And so a lot of these guys, when they got hurt, they got something like that, you either tough through it. On top of that, there was poverty. So they're just doing all they can just to get by, just scrape by and just to get food in their mouth. And these guys were traveling, doing a lot of the carnival wrestling just to feed themselves. So the times were tough. But I would like to say today, I just pulled this up right now, catch wrestling has become so popular thanks to Ken Shamrock, Josh Barnett, Brock Lesnar, Matt Hume. A lot of the guys from Pancrase had continued to promote it. Boss Rutan. A lot of these fighters were really promoting the catch wrestling aspect of stuff on top of the jiu-jitsu. But today, like Villa Imard catch wrestling, my friends Omar Buish, there's a Lion's Den right there. Omar Buish from Sweden, CSW UK. I have a whole group of guys, our CSW grappling team, Nicola Pena, Catch Wrestling Alliance, Snake Pit, Catch Wrestling Magazine, Catch Wrestling UK, Catch Wrestling Brazil, Catch Wrestling Los Angeles, American Catch Wrestling, Catch Wrestling in BJJ, Catch Jiu-Jitsu, North American Catch Wrestling, Catch Wrestling Alliance, Old School Grappling. These are just a few today that have blossomed, that are all contributing, giving back to promote and to hold tournaments. And again, Curran Jacobs did very well, beating a ton of people and proving how tough he was.
Yeah.
But one thing I will say is, like I said, there are becoming so many black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu today. A lot of them are borrowing techniques from catch wrestling, putting it into Jiu-Jitsu, and then they're posting it online and they're calling it Jiu-Jitsu. So there's going to be a lot of it should just be called grappling, because it's such a mix and a hybrid today. And if you're a fighter or competitor, but like me, when I used to fight, I didn't care where anything came from. I would acknowledge everything, but if it worked, I used it. I would use Aikido. I would use Jiu-Jitsu. There's Chin Na, which is the finger locking, great for street fighting. You have the Kinemutai, which is Kali, but it's the biting and pinching arts, which goes perfect when you're rolling around with somebody, because you can put your finger in their eye or pinch or bite. Then you have, all these different things, all these different styles they have some sort of grappling in them on top of the jiu-jitsu.
Great story in that regard too. We talked about in the addendum video, we talk about the carnival challenges and the wrestlers challenging folks from the crowd. Well, Tim Woods, Mr. Wrestling, who had been a national champion, he got his finger bit off from the fan. He was beating the fan, and the guy bit his finger, ended up having his finger amputated. So you talk about the biting and so forth. And another one that's really goes back to dirty wrestling, and you're not supposed to do this in wrestling, but give you an example, like you got a guy belly down and when you're shooting a half with this arm and you're coming across, and most guys, they grab here at the wrist. Old school, Billy Wicks showed me this. Grab the fingers and bend them back. The referee never sees it. His hand is underneath his belly. Grab his fingers. You can break his fingers. Shoot the half. You can pin him, and he's screaming in pain. He's got broken fingers. Same thing like a choke pin. That's dirty wrestling 101.
Pins, choke pins. Yeah, that's cool.
Matt Lindland was big into that, and Phil Baroni told me about. He
used to bite people, and then when they pull back, he'd throw them.
Baroni told me when he fought Lindland a couple times in UFC, and he told me how Lindland would do the small joint. And he said whenever the referee couldn't see the hand, he'd be bending his fingers back. And he said Lindland would reach into the glove and just bend the fingers back. And that's from the old Rough and Tumble.
When I I was supposed to fight one of those guys, either Linlin or for Baroni. They offered that fight to me, but I just got back from England doing a tour, and I was gone for a month. And they said, "Hey, we want you to fight next week." And I go, "Who do you want me to fight?" They go, "Either Phil Baroni or Matt Linlin." And I said, "I only have a week. I'm not in shape right now to fight, so I need at least a month to get ready. So if you guys could give me that, I'll fight." And they said, "Well," and then they just put Matt Linlin and Phil Baroni together.
Yeah, and they had some wars, but to show it, you post your palm here when you pull the finger. You should never do that to anybody, but you post your palm here and twist it when you bend those fingers back, and that's your fulcrum right there. It's just a real dirty move. I taught it to high school wrestlers to Elmwood when I was coaching for Matt Perkel's team. I showed the kids how to do that. It's when they're belly down on a half, when you're shooting the half with the one arm and you reach under. It's just a really dirty move. But Linlin was famous for that kind of stuff. But again, like we talked about, we didn't mention Hugo Optokolek when he took out all the dirty stuff from wrestling. It was still there. It was still passed on. I mean, dirty wrestling is never going to die.
Well, what they say, the saying goes, if you're not cheating, you're not trying.
That's right. What did Jesse Ventura say? Win if you can, lose if you must, but always cheat.
We're coming up on a few minutes here. We got a few minutes left. To each of you, what is the take-home message of this book? I mean, it's the holiday season now. Christmas is coming up. I think this would be a great addition for anybody out there. What makes this book special and unique?
I'm going to say the fact that it raises awareness to all these different wrestlers. It's got a lot of the old wrestlers, a lot of the presidents. It gives some historical stuff. One thing that I will say is that it should have been spell checked one more time before we put it out.
Yeah, we had a guy. We're not going to throw him under the bus, but we had a guy whose sole job was to read the book and spell check it. And I started asking him like a year in because the book's so great and we get a lot of complaints. People are sticklers about that. A year in, I started talking. I was having some beers with this dude, and he was a kickboxer, wasn't really big into grappling, but he went in on the project with us. And he goes to me, I go to him about stuff in the book, and he looked like a deer in the headlights. And I said, "You read the book, right? Your job was to proofread it."
Spell check.
Spell check it, yeah.
So there are some errors in there, but that's why there are, because it had not probably been thoroughly spell checked.
Yeah, and not to shine the light on that, you'll barely detect that when you read it. I'm gonna say, Bob, to answer your question, this is, to me, it's like giving the grapplers, fighters, amateur wrestlers, and pro wrestlers all the keys to the kingdom, because you're learning your roots. Yeah. And you're learning that you're all part of the same roots of the same tree. And I'll leave it at that.
And you get a free t-shirt on top of it when you buy it. And even if you already own it, you buy it for Christmas, get the free t-shirt, and then give the book to someone that you like.
Where can people get the book?
Erik
the only
Paulson.
Place. Yeah,
ErikPaulson.com.
ErikPaulson.com is the only place to get the book. As Erik reminded me the other day, don't go to Amazon or you'll be paying $300 for a book.
I found my book on eBay 2 days ago for $100, and I was signed to a person. It wasn't signed to nobody. It was signed to this guy, and he was selling for $100 signed.
Yeah, and there are a limited amount of copies here, so folks, get on this quick. Seriously, got a little time, but they are going. I know that for a fact. So
going like hotcakes. It's Christmas time.
That's
so
right.
This is the perfect gift.
It's not. There's no slamming anything. We pay homage to all the different coaches, all the different teachers, and basically it just kind of guides you through in the old days, a lot of people that didn't know who was who and what was what in the wrestling world, and how that merged with the Ju-Jitsu after Horian brought it here to America.
Well, let's let's close the show out by giving people, I'll give people my Instagram and Facebook so they can watch this video and anything else I have coming. Go to Instagram.com/Bob Carson MMA, Facebook.com/Bob Carson MMA. Matthew or Erik?
Thank you very much. And you guys have a very Merry Christmas. Thanks for watching.
Merry Christmas, guys, and Merry Christmas, everyone at home. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you,
you
Bob.
guys. Happy holidays. Take care, guys.
Thank you.